Education Youth Committee meeting to order. It was in a very important meeting downstairs. Senator Payne, would you lead us off in a prayer?
Certainly I will.
Thank you.
Let us pray. Dear Lord and Heavenly Father, we come to you today, Lord, and we just thank you for all of our many blessings first and foremost. Lord, we just ask you to lead us and guide us in all things we do. Lord, we just ask you to give us direction in all things that we do. For us in Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen. We're going to jump around in the order a bit. The first bill we'll call up is HB 579. Representative Barrett.
O'Sullivan from Georgia Can, if that's okay with you, Chairman.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay, great.
Good to see you.
Perfect. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for allowing me to come in to see y'all today. HB 579, we're working off of LC number 491811S. House Bill 579 makes a few changes to the Georgia Special Needs Scholarship Program. This program's been around since 2007. There are approximately 6,000 students in it today. We collaborated with many interested parties in crafting this legislation, and I'm pleased to report this was passed unanimously all the way through the process from subcommittee to committee to the House. It passed with 169 votes. I'd like to make clear that this is not an expansion of the program at all. It merely helps to improve the program for parents and school administrators and the Department of Education. Furthermore, it also increases the level of transparency in the program. It will provide scholarship estimates and actual amounts in a more timely manner so that families can plan better. It updates how funds are remitted to the schools. Presently, checks are mailed to the school and payable to the parents. Parents have to drive to the schools and endorse the checks, and it's just a cumbersome process. So this seeks to sort of bring us into the 21st century where funds can be remitted electronically. It also has clarifying language about the appeals process and around scholarship amounts. And it provides more information into the program about the students who participate in it and on the types of conditions participating schools are able to serve. This is a nice bill that enhances a program that has been working well for many families. It was passed in the House again by 169-0, and I'd appreciate your favorable consideration and be happy to answer any questions. There is one minor change that's been requested by the Department of Education. If you'll note on line 69, this deals with the scholarship calculator. The department has requested that we change July 1st to July the 10th, as they did not receive student records until June the 30th. And that's it. Very straightforward little bill.
Thank you. Any comments or questions for the author? Senator Sims.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Question number one. In order to make this more transparent, is why we are refreshing the bill or adding to or taking away. Question number one. Are we going to, or will you all be able to, are going to assess students using state test exams? I've never known if, with the scholarships, if you've ever been able to do the same testing process. And if you do, where do we go to take a look to see if the money is being spent wisely? Because I'm real big on accountability. So are you required to do assessments, exams, tests the same as the public schools? And when you do you submit the results of these exams as well as disciplinary infractions that any of these students may have within the schools that they attend?
That's a great question, and it has come up before in this process. This bill, while the goal since this program's been out since 2007 is to always take things and make them better and better and better, what you're talking about is not encompassed in this bill. This bill is really to make some operational tweaks to the program.
I understand
to make it a little
that.
more family friendly.
I understand that, sir, but my question was, when will we see the results? If these monies, if these scholarships are going towards the students, we need to know if these scholarships are actually working towards a better academic environment, and are they doing the same assessments? Is it working well or not? So we're just, and also you had estimated scholarship amounts. I'm not quite sure what that means. Can you explain that as well? Thank you.
Yes, sir.
I'd be happy to. So for the first question, there are tests that are required and information that's collected through annual assessments. That is part of the annual report that is put out by the Department of Education on an annual basis. You can find those reports going back to 2007 on the Governor's Office of Student Achievement, their website. If you just search the term Georgia Special Needs Scholarship Program Annual Report, it will pop up there, and you'd have at least some information. As the representative said, this legislation doesn't deal with that aspect one way or another.
I understand that. Would it be the same tests that,
It is not the same test.
okay, so there's a different test? Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
All right.
Yep.
So we have no way of comparing what's taking place in regular classrooms with what's happening with the scholarship recipients?
Outside of the annual report, which is already provided.
Okay.
As for your second question, the estimated scholarship amount is already part of current law. That's found in starting at line 63 and continuing through line 70 or so. This just adds a little bit more clarification along the timeline to ensure that parents receive a scholarship estimate as soon as possible, and then the trued up number as of July 10th.
I'm still not understanding what it means by estimated scholarship amounts.
Yes.
Not time frame, but dollars.
Yeah, that is for the parents themselves. It based on the general appropriation and the students' services that they would receive under an IEP. The department puts out a estimate of how much that child would receive for a scholarship, so they can make a determination based on that amount if another school might be available for them.
So department means the DOE?
Department, yes, ma'am.
In fact, Senator, Matt Cardoza from the Department of Education is here today, and if you wanted to have any specific questions for him, I'm sure he'd be available as well. We work very closely with him in this legislation.
Did we answer disciplinary infractions? Because I know that most schools collect that information and send it to DOE as well. DOE, yeah. Do we do the same with these said students?
We do not. The information that's collected is information that the Department of Education would currently have.
So they are treated differently, whole different subset of treatment. Okay, thank you.
It is interesting, Senator, to see that the progression of students, that as far as the breakdown of students in elementary school, middle school, and high school, the numbers are very heavily weighted to elementary, much smaller in middle, and in the 400 to 500 range in the high school program. So it does sort of suggest that often students are beginning in the program and they're working through and probably returning back to the public schools. This is not in the vast majority of cases, the public school has exactly the right response and the need to serve these families. These are just a very small number of students, 5,788 students in 2022 that availed themselves of the program. And the vast majority of those 5,788 are in middle and elementary schools, with very few in the high schools.
You know, all I ask for is accountability, that's it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I agree with my colleague who knows a lot about public education. I did just want to say that I do think you're adding some important reporting requirements, which can lead to it started out with zero accountability, I think, or almost zero, in my opinion, by design. And I do think a few things have been added over the years that are helpful for taxpayer accountability. And I think that this language on lines 86 through 90 is another step in that direction. So,
Thank you, Senator. We work closely with a lot of different interested parties and on both sides of the aisle to make sure we're incorporating things to move in that direction. Thank you.
yeah, so that was. Don't say anything about that.
Any further questions from the committee?
It doesn't, really. It doesn't. No, everything.
Seeing none, we've got we got two speakers signed up. The first one is Chelsea Thompson.
Thank you, Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Chelsea Thompson. I'm General Counsel of Frontline. Just in the interest of time, I'll keep it really brief. We just want to say that we support this bill as it simplifies the ability of a child to obtain an individualized education program to be eligible for the special needs scholarship. We agree that this is a great education bill that lessens burdens on parents and streamlines a process to help out our school kids here in Georgia. And so we ask that you do pass the bill. Thank you.
Thank you. I think you've got one question, Senator Steele.
Hey, thank you for your statement on that. Just to be clear, where you stand on this, because this question's been asked of you before, and I need to make sure we're really clear on this bill. Are you for it or against it?
We're for it.
For it, okay. Yeah, there was some misunderstanding last time that question was posed to you, so
Yeah, there was.
You're clear
There
on
was.
this one?
Oh, yeah, we support. We support.
Understood. Thank you.
Thanks.
Then our last speaker is Stephanie Tanner.
Good afternoon, committee. My name is Stephanie Tanner. I'm with the Georgia School Boards Association. I do want to start by thanking Representative Barrett for being open to feedback from us and many other groups. We appreciate his willingness to listen and to add some of that feedback into the bill. We especially appreciate the transparency around the disaggregated data, as well as what accommodations and services the participating private schools will provide. That is good. I do want to be clear that GSBA has a long-standing position in opposition to voucher programs, and we also have a position asking for more accountability and transparency for those that are in place. So want to state then that we are neutral on this bill, but we would like to see more transparency, and I think that that's what Senator Sims was getting at. So some of the things we have offered recently and in the past are a report of the school's annual audit for public review. Something we were talking about is administering annually a nationally normed academic assessment for reading and math, and making sure that the name of that assessment is reported along with the student performance. I want to be clear that what is reported in the special needs scholarship report, it's a graph that basically, it's a pie graph that shows academic progress, but there's a little asterisk that says you can't compare from school to school because they aren't taking the same assessment. So it's just not the same level of transparency that we see from public schools, where you see every school and, we know that they're all taking the milestones, as well as, we've been talking a lot about the NAEP in certain grades. And so you can see that both at a school level, and that's reported for public review. So we're asking for that. Something to think about, since I know the committee recently discussed a CCRPI single score on a scale of 0 to 100. If we had a nationally normed assessment, maybe we could give a score like that to the participating schools. So want to just add that in as somewhere we could move towards progress in the future. And then the last thing I want to say is that, in public schools, we regularly reevaluate IEPs. And so the goal is to eventually have a student make enough progress that they would exit their IEP. So one thing that we talked about, a representative about having in the bill is reevaluations from elementary to middle school, middle to high school, because that's not currently in the bill, and we would like to make sure that those students are being reevaluated. And the last thing I'll say on that is just want to remind folks there are a lot of good actors, but when a parent authorizes to receive the voucher, they are waiving their federal IDA rights. So again, we are neutral on the bill, but would ask for more transparency now and in the future.
Thank you. You've got one question, Senator Dolezal.
Hello. Help me understand, if you would. I'm going to look past my state rep, if I can,
Okay.
to see you.
Sure.
Respectfully, what you just said seems really disingenuous to me. When your entire organization just put every ounce of lobbying power that you have behind moving against a bill that has annualized testing, that has visibility, that has everything you just said you'd like to see. And so, in fact, I know that even at your board training for your chairman, week before last, there were 3 separate speeches in which, for whatever reason, y'all felt it was necessary to speak against a piece of legislation in this building in the midst of training chair people that are members of boards of education back home. What that has to do with them being effective in their jobs, I don't know. So my question would be, is if these things were added to the bill, would you be supportive, or would it still be this kind of nebulous, well, we're neutral, but add this, this, and this, and we'll still be opposed to the bill or neutral at best, but add this, this, and this? And at what point do we have, if we were to have annualized testing, which is more testing than my kids get in public school, would that be enough? Or would there be something else that would be layered in on top of that?
So we ask for the same regulations and rules for participating private schools that the public schools have because they're receiving public funds.
So it wouldn't be annualized norm reference testing, because we don't have that in public schools.
But we would ask at minimum that they're taking the same tests, right? And they're not.
I thought you said annualized, so I just wanted to clarify that, because that caught my attention, because
Sure.
we just passed a bill here that y'all heavily opposed that did have annualized norm reference testing that for some reason y'all
So
moved against.
our ask there and was that they take the same tests that the public school students, and with that choice of tests, you wouldn't be able to compare even the participating schools or those schools with the public schools. So that was the issue. It's the ability to compare, right? And to truly be able to evaluate academic progress at a school level.
But if they're taking annualized norm reference testing, you can track academic progress.
It's not reported on a school level, right? It's reported for the whole program.
Which would show you academic progress. And if parents have access to that, which is, I think, what we should really care about, then they can
100%.
track academic progress. So it's just, my frustration, honestly, with your organization is growing, because it seems like you seem to continually advocate for one-size-fits-all education when the bulk of the parents in the state are advocating otherwise. And I wish you would get on board with what the parents in this state want rather than what the institutions want.
I think the last thing I'll say to that is we want to make sure parents have good information so that they can make the best choices possible. And that's all we're asking for here, is that they have the same amount of information they would have on the public schools. Thank you.
That was our final speaker. Any further comments or questions for the author? Seeing none, Chair would entertain a motion.
Second.
We've got a motion and a second. I'm going to offer an amendment on the date on line 69, changing that from July 1st, striking that to July 10th. And I'll move that amendment. We got a motion on that?
Second that. You amend the motion on this.
Thank you. We got a motion and a second on the amendment. All in favor, raise your hand. Any opposed? You neutral? So passes 6, no, and a neutral vote. Yeah, that was for the amendment. That's correct. Yeah, that was for the amendment. So it passes 6-1. Moving to the underlying bill, we've got a motion and a second do pass. All in favor, raise your hand. Any opposed, same sign. Passes 6-1. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you.
Representative Barrett, who's your Senate sponsor?
I welcome recommendations on that. And Senator Setzler said he would be willing to carry this for us.
Yeah, he'd be great.
Great if he, no, and
Well, with his absence and me being the chairman, we will bestow that upon him. Thank you.
thank you.
What's that? That's right. You got to pick on the people that aren't here. What's that? Yeah. So we'll keep jumping around on the agenda. Representative Leverett had to go make a vote in House Judiciary, so we'll move on to HB 1104. Representative Crawford. Thank you for coming today. I'll start off and then let you present your portion of the bill if you prefer.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to members of the committee.
And thank you for bringing this bill forward. Just for the committee members to know, we've kept the original language in HB 1104, which I do fully support. It deals with the mental health of student athletes, and we'll let Representative Crawford present that portion. But there's also been several other pieces of legislation that have been added to this bill, several of which passed through this committee this year. Floor is yours.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And I'm coming from LC number 491913S. And as the chairman stated, I will address and tell you the portion of the bill 1104 which passed through the House. I'm unfamiliar with the other language in the bill, so the portion that I'm going to discuss is Part 5, and that starts on page 18. And the legislation that, again, 1104 in this original form that was passed, it seeks to address mental health risks for student athletes at the high school and middle school level. And what the bill essentially does is it obligates our athletic associations to consult with the Department of Behavioral Health to gather information on mental health and suicide prevention. We're going to ask our athletic associations to post that information so that it can be viewed by parents, student athletes, and coaches. That information will then be passed out to, again, coaches, athletes, and parents throughout the year. Again, this is information that will be coming from the Department of Behavioral Health. And then lastly, it's going to ask our coaches to review pre-approved suicide prevention and mental health literature and videos, and it's pre-approved through a National Federation of High School Sports. What this bill does is, again, it just simply aggregates all of the mental health information and makes it useful for our student athletes and their parents so that they can be better informed, and it equips our coaches with that same knowledge. And this bill is fully supported by the fully supported by Georgia High School Association, which is the largest athletic association in the state, and it mirrors what they are already doing, GHSA, with cardiac arrest awareness as well as concussion protocols. Those two issues, concussion protocols and cardiac awareness, they're very important, but I see those as reactive measures. This would be more of a proactive measure, and so that we can better support our student athletes. Again, that is the bill, the portion that I am familiar with. I cannot testify to any other part of the bill, but I'm open to answer any questions as it pertains to that portion.
Thank you, Representative. Any comments or questions for Part 5 of the bill?
Thank you.
Senator Dolezal.
Thank you, Representative. Thank you for bringing this. I think I understand the heart behind what you're trying to do. I do have a couple of concerns. One, as we saw during our original mental health debate here, what some people consider mental health may not be what other people consider mental health. And I'm a little concerned, well, I'm actually a lot concerned about requiring private schools to make materials available, because you keep saying ask, but the reality is we're requiring. And so I'm concerned about making private schools show government-approved material as it relates to mental health, which the scope of which I think, or the definition of which seems to be changing pretty dramatically and rapidly. So I'm wondering if you would be open to a friendly amendment to remove private schools from this requirement in particular. And I think that we could do that by striking lines 464 to 466, and then by striking and participating private school on line 478. I think that would cover it. I would ask my colleagues to help me, but I just wanted to get your feedback on that.
And thank you for that friendly amendment, Senator. One of the, and I guess in speaking with the executive director of the Georgia High School Association, one of the issues is that there are private schools that are under the umbrella of GHSA. So that would be, I think, somewhat difficult to prohibit private schools from following this particular protocol if they are under the umbrella of GHSA, which is, again, one of the largest athletic association in our state.
I don't know that it'd be difficult if we didn't just change what I just said, though, right? Because this would be the only thing that would require that. Because if it could be required by Georgia High School Association, why don't we just do it that way and instead of bringing this bill in the first place?
Well, and there are other athletic associations as well. And so, again, this information is not going to be anything different from the Department of Behavioral Health. They have reviewed and approved the language, and so we would just be sharing that information from the Department of Behavioral Health as it pertains to suicide prevention and that kind of information.
Well,
And I'm sorry, you referenced a debate on mental health. I'm unfamiliar with that debate, so I can't address that specific.
sure. When we passed House Bill 1013 here in both chambers, one of the concerns that some advocates had was that we were outsourcing the definition of mental health to the WHO, and that we would use the DSM-5 documentation, which included transgenderism as a mental health disorder. And I think that as a requirement to participate in sports or coach sports, that you would potentially be having to review something that really has nothing to do with sports, I think would be, again, I think your intent of the bill is when students are having significant mental health issues as it relates to suicide, like you just mentioned, I think you want to make sure they have that they know that there's help available. And I'm just concerned perhaps if that's your intent, I'm concerned of the unintended consequence. And I'll read this one more time and see if I can catch anything else. But I just wanted to ask you that question.
Thank you, and if I may respond.
Absolutely.
The information that the coaches will be required to review is the National Federation of High Schools pre-approved literature, which, again, coaches are already using the NFHS, I know it's so many acronyms, for cardiac arrest awareness as well as heat exhaustion and concussion protocol. There's nothing in that literature that addresses some of your concerns at all. It's really with suicide prevention. So while I understand 1013, I'm somewhat familiar with that bill because it predates me in the General Assembly. That also dealt with some mental illness. This is not what this deals with. This is, again, mental health is as it is used in suicide prevention as it is used by the National Federation of High Schools Association, as well as the information from the APEX program at the Department of Behavioral Health. So it doesn't touch into some of the concerns that you may have.
Sure. As I read the bill, though, the association in consultation with DBHDD would develop and post on its public website guidelines and relevant materials. So it may be that you're endeavoring to have them use the acronym that you just mentioned, but that any future commissioner would be able to have that material be whatever they want it to be. There's nothing in this bill that limits it to what you're referencing, and that's my concern.
To that last point, and thank you again, that this is more so the athletic associations can consult with, so that's not saying what athletic associations will or will not use, so that, and I understand your concern, but I don't know that I can, or fully, again, say what will be used, what won't be used. Right now, it's, again, we're talking suicide prevention. That's the main focus. Part of that is because we've seen suicides increase with student athletes around our state at the high school and middle school level, just because of the pressures and the higher level of anxiety that student athletes face when they're competing. And that anxiety level and that stress level is different from the traditional student. So that's really what we're trying to do with this bill.
And maybe the fix to assuage my concern, and my colleagues agree, would to replace mental health in this document, in this bill, with suicide prevention.
Any further comments or questions on this portion of the bill? Thank you, Representative Crawford. I appreciate you bringing this piece of the legislation forward. I'll go through the rest of the bill.
Okay. And again, thank you for allowing me to present today. This is my first bill, so I appreciate you guys.
I thought that's what you were doing.
This is just a standard.
And I do appreciate it. Again, if I'm looking at, I cannot speak to any other section of this bill, and so because some of the language in this bill goes against what I was trying to do for Section 5, is it possible to only have a hearing only for this particular piece of legislation?
No, I believe we will probably take a vote today.
Okay.
Thank you, though.
All right. Thank you.
And I'll go, like I said earlier, I'll go through the rest of the bill. We added several pieces of legislation to this bill, several of which did pass through this committee earlier this session. Starting in Section 1, and Representative Crawford, thank you for going through Section 5. I appreciate that.
Thank you.
So starting in Section 1, I would like to thank Greg Dolezal. This is his bill, the bill that he authored, Senator Dolezal. Senate Bill 365, which he sponsored, and you can refer to lines 37 through 90 in this bill. It did pass this committee in mid-February. And this language, it guarantees parents and guardians will have access to their child's school records and allows them to sign up for email notifications when a child accesses materials from a school library. And then moving to Part 2 of the bill, this part of the bill is a portion of a bill, it's Bill 532, Senate Bill 532, and it's a bill that I sponsored. It passed through this committee in late February, and this has to do with sex education, that it would not be taught to students until after the 6th grade. It also requires the state board to update their material. There would be, I believe, a 45-day review process of that, and then when it comes and trickles down to the local boards for their adoption, there would be a 2-week period where parents could review and make comments as well at that point. And then moving on to Section 4, skipping around a bit. These are lines 426 through 444. This portion of the bill has to do with our state charter schools and their ability to utilize staff resources and personnel for education services providers to provide employment benefits to those teachers. As many of us on this panel, on this board, we're strong proponents of school choice. This language will help ensure that the government boards the governing boards, the state charter schools retain the ability to hire and fire personnel who work at these schools and retain the overall operational responsibility for these schools. And again, I refer you to lines 426 to 444 in Section 4. And then backing up, finally would like to thank Senator Cardin Summers for Senate Bill 438, and this is Part 3 of the bill. And I'll refer you to lines 188 to 425. Senate Bill 438 takes a common sense approach to this issue of protecting the rights of women and girls sports to compete in sports on a level playing field. This bill provides public schools and private schools that participate in sport leagues with public schools to not permit boys to compete in these sports and that are designated for girls. And no matter the gender identity the boy may claim at that time for sporting events, the bill also it prohibits schools from allowing boys to use multiple occupant restrooms for changing areas designated for girls. The bill also creates a grievance process that allows parents and children whose rights have been violated under this code section to seek court order requiring compliance with these provisions. And they can also recover reasonable attorney fees. Each provision of this bill is strongly supported by our Lieutenant Governor Burt Jones, and I'm thankful for the opportunity to propose this legislation and these several pieces of different bills that many of which we've heard in this committee and passed out of this committee this session. While this bill has several parts, I think they each have a common thread: empowering parents to ensure that children are learning, competing in safe and supportive atmospheres, and also dealing with sports. This bill also ensures that sex education be age appropriate in a manner that parents are fully aware of and in an agreeance to in public schools where their children will be taught. This bill also protects the mental health of student athletes and gives parents and coaches much needed tools to help their students succeed. And perhaps, and most importantly, this bill protects the rights of women to compete against each other in women athletic competition that is fair to each and one of them. This bill enacts Title X more than 50 years ago, which was one of our country's greatest achievements, unlocking a range of possibilities for women in education and athletic competition. And with that, I've gone through the bill. I know it's quite a bit, and I'd be happy to take any questions from the committee.
I don't think you can press that thing. I don't know, right? You can start. She's
9.
I'm not. Okay, great. Okay. Thank you. So on my first question is about Section 2. So looking at lines, it says 1114, the public school shall make the sex education curricula available to parents and guardians and the public for review online. And going down to, lines 129 through 138, it sets up before approval of any sex ed curricula, you have to publish it for 2 weeks, have several meetings, have written comments, oral comments, comments submitted through email for at least 45 days. I can't help but notice that the procedure that we're operating under down here seems to bear no resemblance to the type of procedure that this bill is insisting that school boards go through to conduct their business. I mean, this legislation isn't online. You pull up the bill, it still just has Senator Crawford's bill. This popped up in the last hour. Can you please explain why it's okay for us to operate in such a manner to attach 5 different bills and not let the public know and not vet them, but these school systems were requiring on a full page of code that they adhere to a completely different standard?
Yeah, great question, Senator. I'd like to go back to some of my comments in the presentation. The bill you're referring to was vetted in this committee in its entirety and was voted out, and just didn't make it out of rules. So, I mean, it has been vetted. The public has seen it, along with several others of these measures. And simply what it's doing is it's empowering parents and protecting kids is what we're trying to do through transparency, in my opinion.
Thank you for that. The next question I wanted to ask you is related to, we did have some discussion last time we heard this bill. Although actually, one quick response to what you just said, we did not actually hear all of the bills that are being attached here. We did hear this particular one, so that would be my brief rejoinder to your response. We did talk about the exceptions that you put in, which are, or not you, but were put in the bill, which are good ones as it relates to lines 150 and 151 about allowing discussion of child abuse and assault awareness and prevention and menstruation. So my question, though, is how are the schools supposed to talk about menstruation without talking about human reproduction, which is forbidden before 6th grade?
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought that up. What I'd like to first do is give a shout out to my administrative assistant, Rachel Whitted here. She did catch that carve-out, both of those carve-outs dealing with child abuse and menstruation was not in the bill, which was added. Thank you for doing that. Which, allows teachers, as a girl goes through puberty, to be able to talk about those sensitive issues if they don't have that support structure at home. As far as, and I'm not a woman, but I did stay at a Holiday Inn Express once. So, but what I would say to the reproductive organ part of it or whatnot, I don't think that would align with sex education. So I think they.
So you think you could talk to a girl about menstruation without touching on any aspect of human reproduction? Because that's what the bill said. How? Please let us know. How would you do that?
No, that's a great question. I've got 2 daughters. One is currently going through puberty, and my wife and I have been able to successfully, with her guidance and her leadership, my wife's leadership, have had those conversations with her without talking about reproduction.
So you talk about, you don't give any explanation for why the menstruation is happening. Because if you give any explanation for why it's happening, that involves human reproduction. And I can stop down this line. I'll just posit to you that I think that is a practical impossibility that's contained in the bill.
No, it's a great question. I appreciate you bringing that forward. My wife may have handled that part of it with my daughter as I handled that part with my son, but I think that's appropriate for parents to do that.
But you said, okay, I'll try one more time. You say here that you can talk about those things, because what if they aren't getting those? Those are sort of like critical things that people do need to know about it, and I believe in your wisdom you put in those exceptions for that very reason. And so then I'm just trying to, again, I'll be quiet, point out that you really can't talk about that, which you did decide was a public good, without running afoul of the rest of the bill. And I might have a couple more questions later, but I want to let my colleague ask a few. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Senator Halpern?
I wanted to just first acknowledge that Representative Crawford's bill is now filled with a bunch of bills that have, as they've been vetted through this committee, been some of the more contentious kind of conversation that we've had over the course of this biennium. So many of the things that we've done in this committee really have been like easy things that everybody can agree to, but this particular bill now is filled, I think, with the content that has been the most difficult. And so I feel sorry for the gentleman, Representative Crawford, who's now, for his first bill, got it filled with stuff that's not going to be easy for everybody to get behind, as his bill was when it came through the House. Kind of on the same point that Senator Parent was just making, a little reminder here that sixth grade is kind of the trigger point on this, and there are a lot of certainly young girls, much younger than that, who, even in this carve-out for menstruation, are experiencing that. We can argue that schools should not start talking about these things till sixth grade, and I could argue back that that's already a little late. Not that you don't want to be age appropriate, but I'm not sure that this bill actually gives consideration to what's really happening in the real world in people's homes and with their bodies, because that is getting younger and younger due to lots of reasons. So that's on that one. You know, when we're talking about gender identity, or what we're now going to say is whatever sex, biological sex you were born at based on your reproductive biology and genetics. I mean, again, I think that we're codifying into law issues that are not pervasive issues in the state, especially as we talk about, you know, competition in sports. So that's an issue, because as I recall, when we heard that bill way back, there was not really an example that was given to this being an issue in the state of Georgia. Many of the video that I recall was showing it in some other state, I don't remember where, North Carolina maybe, but not Georgia.
In regards to
The sports, the transgender sports and the competition,
yeah,
and girls
I
not being.
went to I'll let you finish.
Go
Sorry.
ahead. So, I don't know. I guess no question, just a comment to say that I'm disappointed that, you know, we're at this point. This is the time of the year where we're likely to run across, you know, bills that didn't go anywhere for reasons prior, that now, you know, it's like we had another bill earlier that was a Christmas tree bill earlier today. This is now the Christmas tree bill of all kinds of things that are hard to get behind.
No, and
No other
thank you
comment.
for your comments. You know what, my response to it would be, you know, the heart of this bill is to protect kids, number one, protect girls' sports. I went to and then empower parents by informing them, would be kind of the heart of this bill. I personally, of course, I know we differ in this, but I don't see how this is hard at all. Any of these measures are hard to get behind. I went to a conference and heard a college or a former college athlete swimmer, Riley Gaines, and, you know, coming from, you know, a young lady that experienced this in Atlanta at a swim meet, was forced to compete, number one, against a biological male, was forced to change in the same changing station with a biological male, and in her words, had all the parts, and I believe she was still a teenager, was exposed to all that, which I think is highly inappropriate and grotesque. And I've got two daughters that I spoke to earlier, and if my daughters are ever exposed to that, I'll keep those comments to myself. But you know, we've got to protect women. We've got to protect women's sports. You know, we've come so far in the past 50 years, and you know, to allow biological males, no matter what they're transitioning from, to compete and destroy these collegiate sports is appalling to me.
Can I, well, I don't know if any, they've got questions, okay.
Yeah.
And then I'd love to ask another.
Senator Dolezal.
Sorry, Senator. I mean to cut you
No,
off.
no, no, I want you to go first. I already-
I do have a question for the sponsor of the bill, if that's okay to come
Yeah.
back to this. And I understand that the purpose of your bill is basically have these videos available, right? Videos, materials available on a website, suicide prevention. as I read through it again, I became very curious as to why healthcare provider was defined on line 456 to 461. I then saw that it's not mentioned again until lines 494. And so I'd like to ask you about Section E, because Section E has this massive liability carve-out and then references basically there cannot be any liability or cause of action for these schools or their workers or employees for any act or omission related to the removal or non-removal of a student athlete participating in an interscholastic activity in conjunction with the actual or perceived risk to the mental health of such student athlete or another student athlete. Provided, however, that this section shall not include healthcare providers unless they are acting in a volunteer capacity. So if the intent of your bill is essentially let's put good materials out there for students to have access to, why are we referencing removal or non-removal of students from sports? I'll just start with that. And then there's this carve-out for healthcare providers who are not mentioned anywhere else in the bill. And I don't know if that's just the lawyering this thing up, or if there is a legislative intent that you communicated to them in the drafting of this bill that you could help me understand.
Thank you for that question. If you're discussing, and I'll go with Section E of not creating liability, in theory, anyone who is, let's say, for instance, is civilly placed in a civil suit as someone, an individual, if they are sued in their individual capacity, there would be an immunity. If they are sued in their official capacity, that would be a suit against the school district, which would likely be an immunity anyway, as well. So there could not be any liability theoretically.
Okay. So I just find it really interesting that this begins to talk about the removal of student athletes participating in interscholastic athletic activity, because I don't hear that as your intent at all, to have students removed. And so I just don't know why all that language found its way into this bill, and the reference of healthcare providers are immune unless they're a volunteer. And literally healthcare providers are not mentioned anywhere else in this language until we get to this carve out. And when all you're talking about is putting materials on our website, I just don't know why that's necessary, which does make me wonder, like, am I missing something in this bill that somehow, a student's going to be removed from a sport and they're going to be contesting it because either they didn't watch the videos or that somebody had a concern about their mental health and pulled them out of sports. I don't hear that as your intent. I just really, that's a lot of legalese there.
And I can respond to that. The point, this creates no obligation for student athletes. It creates no further obligation for parents. If anything, it creates an obligation for the coaches and the athletic associations. So if a coach is obligated to review the material, which is what this bill is requesting them to do, that coach or anyone that a coach that's actually watching the video will not be held liable for not being able to see something in a student and not pulling him or her from the track or the baseball diamond or the football field. So that's what Section E is discussing. It has nothing to do with whether or not a student is doing something wrong. So that is the point of the bill. And then to go back to what I was initially saying is that, again, legally you could not create any liability because, again, if a coach, for whatever reason, is accused of not putting somebody in the game or putting someone in the game because of what they perceive to be a mental health issue, you couldn't sue that coach anyway. Again, if you're suing in the individual capacity, there would be an immunity. If you're suing it.
Thank you. Do you know why the healthcare provider piece is in this at all?
And before you answer that, we've got Ledge Counsel was going to add some clarity as well.
Just, Senator, the bill was drafted almost modeled after the concussion management statute that the General Assembly passed a couple of years ago. So I think there's some elements of the concussion management treatment kind of protocol.
Which makes sense as to why students would be removed for a concussion. I don't quite understand why they'd be removed in the capacity of videos being placed on the Athletic Association's website.
Right, and I don't want to overreach into policy. I think there's just the potential for implication that if you are watching those videos and receiving that information, if that were to trigger any responsibility to make a decision regarding whether a player should be activated or not activated,
And that makes a lot of sense as it relates to healthcare providers, unless they're acting in a volunteer capacity, somebody runs out on a field because of a concussion. I don't know that any of this relates to what the underlying bill is.
Some context and background.
Okay, thank you.
Senator, any further comments or questions?
Oh, yeah, I want to go.
Yeah, sure. Senator
Thank you.
Parent.
All right. Moving on to some other sections of the bill. So on this section 3.2, about multiple occupancy restrooms or changing areas. How will this be enforced? I mean, will there be an enforcement mechanism? And if so, how will that be conducted? I'm just wondering if, I can't imagine. I'm not sure enforcement is, yeah. 196. Actually, I'll just hear your thoughts on how enforcement will work.
Thank you.
I mean, I'm assuming we're not going to do inspections of people's private parts. So how are we going to enforce it?
Yeah, great question. I mean, the enforcement would be placed on the school itself. There's a grievance process. Right, yeah, for the parents. Yeah, and then there's also a grievance process for the parents as well.
Right, so there's got to be some way to enforce it that either involves the child, I guess, having to have their birth certificate on them or some sort of genital inspection, I would think. And both of those seem maybe like they could lead to some difficult consequences that schools might not want to involve themselves in. But my last question, I think, is on the sports piece, the athletics piece. You were mentioning some collegiate sports, which I don't think is covered in here. Am I correct? Because they have like the International Olympic Committee and the NCAA have their own rules. So I'm correct, right, that collegiate sports is not a part of this?
That is correct.
Okay.
Yeah, I misspoke on that part. But
no,
was
that's
just
fine.
giving
Yeah,
an
an
example
example,
that
okay.
actually really happened here in Atlanta, Georgia.
Oh, I'm familiar with the example. Yeah, just.
And then
just,
going back, what was your other question?
Oh,
the-
just, you mean on the last piece
Yeah, you were asking.
about the enforcement?
Oh,
Or-
yeah, and the enforcement. Yeah, like I said, you've got a carve out here where parents can, file a grievance. But, if a biological male is changing in a girl's restroom, I mean, it's going to be pretty clear if you've got that happening. I mean,
Right, so maybe photographs might need to be taken?
I would
I'm
imagine
just,
the girls would
I'm
come out.
wondering how you.
I mean, I don't know if you have a daughter, but I mean, if my daughter comes screaming out of a bathroom that a boy's changing the bathroom, then I think there would be a right for an investigation into that. We've got to protect girls. That's all we're trying to do here.
I mean, I am a girl who grew up in, so thank you. Thank you for that. I do have experience with all of the things we're discussing and find it interesting that the three women on the committee aren't viewing all this as favorably as the rest of you gentlemen.
Yeah, I would just say, I mean, if there's a male changing in a little girl's bathroom, that's perversion to me. And if the girls come out screaming that and there's a grievance filed, I think it would be pretty easy to determine that.
So do we have men changing in little girls' bathrooms?
If this bill
In
passes
Georgia?
and signed into law. I mean, I gave one example. Of course, I know it was a little bit older and a little bit of at the college level, but this would prevent that. Would you want a male changing in a female's bathroom?
So I don't want to go too far down the
When you're talking about a minor?
collegiate road because that's not what we don't have jurisdiction over that. And that particular case, I know did spark a lot of conversations, and I do believe the NCAA is evolving on all these issues, just the same way the International Olympic Committee is, and every school system, public and private, throughout many, many parts of the world.
And I would argue that's
So-
what this is doing here. We're evolving and protecting kids.
Right,
So-
and I don't, some people have their way of doing it that can put kids at harm. I mean, surely you're aware of the case of the transgender child who just died in Oklahoma after being beaten up in the bathroom. I mean, so I would just say, there are different examples all of us could pull to about relative degrees of harm, and what you view as harm to one community may be very valid that that's harmful. There are corresponding harms caused to other groups of people that also need to be vetted and taken into consideration is all I'm saying. But my last question is, so does this aspect of sports, the ban on transgender athletes part of the bill, does that apply to, would this apply to elementary schools and elementary school athletics or middle school?
They would apply to all athletics.
Okay, because,
Yeah.
I'm sure we're all aware there really is no advantage. In fact, it's the opposite for boys until you reach like 14-ish. So I just feel like when you're talking about that, and if you are talking about a child that's vulnerable and is transgender and wants to participate, and there literally is no advantage biologically, then you really are at that point, in my opinion, just doing harm to that child and singling them out. And there is no harm being caused to any girl because there simply is no strength differential or anything. I mean, all of us were faster than all the boys until at least like 8th grade, 7th or 8th grade. So, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I would just answer that. What's that? That's correct, yeah. That is true, yeah.
Oh, so you don't think it includes elementary schools? That was my question, as I wasn't sure if it did.
I think functionally,
But yeah, if they did compete, it would include that. But there again,
I
I'd
see.
just like to go
Okay.
back to, females, which I'm not one. Y'all been fighting for your rights for equal places in all aspects of our lives, and here we are carving or digging away at this, allowing biological males to compete in female sports, and it's a common sense thing to protect females here.
Well, I hear your
in
point.
the
I was
restroom
just
and in sports.
So,
I mean, it kinda
but setting
stops
that
there for
aside,
me.
I was just talking about how there really is no advantage, which then, when you're young, like well before puberty and even into puberty, that's just not a thing. There is no male-female strength differential or ability differential based on gender or sex at that point. So I just was asking the question that wouldn't you think then, given that there might be a different bit of consideration for the ability of children to participate in something like youth sports, which has so many important value setting aspects to it. I mean, that's one of the things that's critical about it. It's not just about winning and losing. It's about learning how to win, learning how to lose, learning how to be on a team, learning how to dedicate yourself to things, setting the stage for having a goal and meeting it by yourself or as part of a group. And all those things are really important skills, which is, it's well outside of just having my soccer team beat yours. And so when you take away, to me, the fact that they're really, when you take away the part of it, which is more real starting in high school, of course, where there is a typical strength differential and ability differential between males and females, that you just don't have that in younger kids. And so therefore, I think it's my opinion that the other things could certainly behoove the committee to consider the harm being done to folks not allowing them to participate when there really is no benefit to the girls that you're trying to protect. So,
Appreciate your
Thank you.
comments,
Yeah, that's-
Senator. But it does not have to do with any kind of co-ed sports. So this bill would not change any of that if there's co-ed sports there. And there again, we're just trying to protect girls and the sanctity of their sports and protect them in bathrooms as well. Any further questions? Senator Bearden? Yeah, I can't talk. You number 2?
Yes, sir. I believe in lines 217, that will probably take out the reasoning for the exams or photographs that we were talking about a while ago, because it's been a while since I had to enroll one of my children in school or in athletics, although I do have one that's still in high school athletics. Birth certificates had to be provided. So that's where that would come into play. You don't have to take the
Yeah.
pictures or the exams, as we heard just a little while ago. And I also believe this is also making sure that schools are not actually permitting this to occur. I mean, you may have that first offense, but if the school continue to allow this to occur. That's where this action will come into play. I just want to kind of point that out to make sure that we do know a birth certificate is in play here. Sorry, got tongue-tied.
Thank you. We've got a couple of speakers. We've got a hard stop at 4. We've got one more bill after this. I don't know if we'll be able to get to it, but we've got Kim Jones, and then Mike Griffin's on deck. But if you could keep your comments brief, thank you.
Thank you, Chairman, and the committee. I am here in support of Representative Crawford's original bill. I too just received the substitute like when we got in here, so I haven't had a chance to vet that thoroughly. It started out as 63 lines, and we now see it's up to 500. Our concern is any controversial language put into such a wonderful bill. As many of you know, suicide is the second leading cause of death of our children. Anywhere that we can get them mental health assistance and assessments is paramount to just keeping our children alive at this point. So I just support the original line item for House Bill 1104, the 63 lines as it was presented.
Thank you. Mike Griffin, and then Chelsea Thompson, you're on deck.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I am Mike Griffin. I'm the Public Affairs Representative with the Georgia Baptist Mission Board. And I'm here primarily to speak to the amendments that you're adding on today. We do support that. One of the areas, as many of you know, I work with Georgia Baptist is also child protection policy. And so I think what you're talking about here in relationship to parent library notification is very good. I think the restrictions and the things that you're talking about with the sex education part relating to those that are 6th grade and older, I believe it is. That's the line you draw there. I think those are very important and needed in our day. And Georgia Baptist in 2021 passed a resolution protecting girls' sports. So we wholeheartedly support especially those 3 sections that you're adding onto this bill. We would appreciate the committee's favorable support. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Chelsea Thompson, and then Stephanie Tanner, you're on deck.
Good afternoon. Good to see you guys again. So just first want to say that we appreciate that after the agenda was released, we briefly reviewed the legislation and appreciate very much some of the things that have been added to this bill here today. And so I'm here to kind of speak on those certain portions of the substitute that I'm familiar with and share our support. So the first one, Senator Dolezal's portion for the libraries and parent notification. We support this initiative that requires libraries to allow parents to sign up for a notification system for every time their child checks a book from the library, checks out a book from the library. And this elevates and protects parents' rights to oversee and make informed decisions about their child's education. And then for the second section dealing with sex ed, this portion of the bill we support because it protects our kids and keeps our children safe from premature and sexual education on topics that are inappropriate for children ages 11 and 12. Childhood, we believe, is a time of innocence that should be cherished and protected, and by limiting sex education and ensuring that certain grades, particularly prior to 6th grade, do not have such government instruction, we can preserve the innocence of our children and promote positive role models and values and help mitigate the harmful effects of sexualization and allow them to grow and develop in a healthy and nurturing environment. And this bill also gives the power back to our communities and local schools to decide if they want to teach sex education or not. So we believe we need this legislation in order to protect our Georgia children and advocate for parents' involvement and parents' rights and affirm that decisions pertaining to child sex education belong to the parents and not the government. And then lastly, for the Save Girls Sports portion, as this bill states, there are immutable biological differences between males and females, as we've kind of discussed today. In the attempt to undermine these scientifically supported differences between the male and female athletes is an affront to fair play and safety. Allowing athletes to freely choose their competition creates an uneven playing field, unfair competition, and unsafe sporting environment. And so through this piece of legislation, those participating in girls' sports or joining girl athletic teams and clubs must be biologically female, especially considering that male biology provides a distinct physical advantage in sports. This common sense approach will protect female athletes, ensure a level playing field for competitive play, and ultimately safeguard the future of girls' sports. A total of 22 states so far have protected female athletes in their state, and we hope that Georgia can do the same regarding that bathroom bill portion as well. Maintaining separate restrooms, we'd say, based on sex, is to ensure privacy and safety for all the individuals, because this bill, as it discusses female and males, vice versa. And so allowing males to access female restrooms, as I said, and then vice versa, can lead to discomfort, harassment, potentially unsafe situations for those using these facilities. And so for all these reasons, though, we just want to say that we support HB 1104 as a substitute.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Didn't realize you could speak that quickly. Our last speaker is Stephanie Tanner.
So I'm actually going to waive for a student named Adam. I'm already on record with our concerns about the HB 532 portion of the bill. We respectfully ask that you strike the opt-in only language, but I'd like you to hear from a student.
Thank you. My name is Adam. I understand that we have a hard stop, so I'll try to make this quick, but I do have a couple questions about specifically the things that have been added onto this bill. It's not remiss to me that these are very controversial topics that have kind of been snuck in kind of last minute. We don't have a lot of time that is necessary to go over them. But there are a lot of definitions that I think I wish I had the paper so I could look over the definitions, but of course it's not public information yet or hard to find. Definite such a biological sex, how is that defined in this bill, especially in terms of when we think about transgender people taking hormones or going through surgeries? For example, if we had a transgender student who was transitioning to male and taking testosterone, under this bill, would that student then have to or be forced to participate in female or in the girls' sports instead of male, even though they're taking testosterone? And would that not be unfair? That's confusing to me. Also, with the bathroom part, if we have a transgender person who has gotten genital surgeries, would they still be going into? It's just I'm confused at what we're defining biological sex as in this bill, if that could be clarified. And also for the part about sex education, there was talk about making sure things are age appropriate, but I'm curious as to how things are determined to be age appropriate and who decides that, because I think some of us have very different opinions of when things need to be taught and when students need to know things. I also understand that y'all are a little bit older than we are. Things have changed significantly in recent years with the rise of social media and such. I am 16, I'm in high school. You're talking about not having any sex ed before 6th grade. We knew about sex before 6th grade. Maybe you didn't have friends, but I did, and we had older siblings who talked about sex, talked about things, so having these things but not having any sort of education to correct that, it seems not beneficial to me. So these are just things that are concerning to me. If you would like to speak on any of that, I don't know.
Thank you for your time. Thank you. Representative Crawford, I didn't ask you when we started this process, with the additions to the bill, do you want Section 5 to stay in the bill? I should have asked you that. I apologize.
Thank you for that question. It looks like yes, I would like for that to stay in the bill. Of course, I would like everything else to be stripped out, but I don't think that that's an option. So yes, I'd like that to stay inside the bill, and like to see if there's an opportunity for the original language in 1104 to be placed in another bill, if that's possible.
So you would like the original language in 1104 to stay in this bill?
And potentially see if the original language for 1104 can be placed into another bill as well. Is that possible?
Okay. Thank you.
Chair.
Yes. No, you're 11.
Comment. As we look and speak about the different parts of the bill, especially dealing with sex education, and every one of us sitting in this room would love for our children to be safe, to know that our children are safe every day. Sometimes children who do not have the right information are in just as much danger as a child that has what we consider to be too much or not enough. So you have to look at it from both spectrums. And as we sit here as adults, it almost sounds like the conversation should be directed towards older folks. And the young man just said age, and there's a difference. There is no difference. The same things that young people had to deal with in earlier ages, they're having to deal when we were much younger. You're still having to deal with. There's no different. Body parts haven't changed. None of that has changed. The way we do things and the way we say things. So can we have a Department of Education that would sit down and decide how sex education, or if it's not going to be taught in the state of Georgia? Is that a reasonable ask, rather than every year we have a piece here and a piece there, and by the time we're done, none of it makes a whole lot of sense? So children need to know. They need, and safety comes with knowledge. If you're not knowledgeable of certain things, you're very vulnerable. So that's my statement, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Steele. Senator Steele.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I know this is a lot of legislation to try to wrap our heads around, but out of respect to my good friend, my fellow freshman, Representative Crawford, who I came in with, I'd like to make a motion do pass.
We've got a motion do pass. We have a second.
Second.
We've got a motion do pass and a second. I believe we've got an amendment.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I'm going to walk you all through an amendment that I'd like to make that references a number of the concerns I laid out with Section 5. I worked with Michael on this. He and I compared notes. And essentially what I'm going to do is I'm going to remove private schools. I'm going to replace mental health risks with suicide risk and prevention. And I'm going to remove the liability section and the healthcare section as well. So the way that I'm going to do that is I'm going to move to strike and participating private school on line 31, strike mental health risk on line 32, and replace it with suicide risk and prevention. Do the same with mental health on line 33, striking it and replacing it with suicide risk and prevention. Striking on line 34 to provide for limited liability. Moving over to page 19, striking and participating private schools on line 455. Striking all of section 2. Striking all of section 4. Striking and participating private school on line 467. Striking mental health risks on line 474 and replacing it with suicide risk and prevention. Doing that also at the end of line 474 into 475, striking mental health and replacing it with suicide risk and prevention. Striking and participating private schools on line 478 and lines 489 and 90. And then I would also like to strike section F as well. And that's my motion.
We've got an amendment. Do we have a second?
Senator, did you mean subsection E rather than F?
I'd actually, Michael, I meant actually subsection E and F, yes.
And F?
Thank you for that clarification. We've got an amendment that's been moved. Do we have a second? We've got a motion and a second on the Dolezal amendment. All in favor, raise your hand. All opposed? Amendment passes 4-3. Now we've got a motion and a second for due pass on the underlying bill. All in favor, raise your hand. All opposed, same sign. Passes 4-3. Thank you very much. Representative Leverett, you rolled the dice and we ran out of time. And in education meetings, it tends to happen. But we do have a meeting tomorrow at 4 p.m. We'll have you up first. Yeah, thank you. Sorry for